The fire crackled, casting long shadows against the walls. Luna turned a page, the sound of parchment sharp in the quiet room. Serafina and Vespa watched the flames, the stillness heavy and comfortable. Then, the front door slammed against the wall with a force that rattled the floorboards. Noctis stood in the entryway, chest heaving, his face pale. He did not speak. He only held out a sheet of paper, a sketch of a jagged, pulsing stone. "Someone picked this up at the market," he gasped, his voice tight. "And now they are wasting away under a lethal curse." Serafina was on her feet instantly, pulling a heavy encyclopedia from the shelf. Pages flipped rapidly as they crowded around the coffee table. Fingers traced diagrams until Luna stopped, her hand hovering over a rough drawing. "It is a void shard," she whispered, the air in the room turning cold. "It feeds on the life force of its owner." The comfort of the fire was gone. They exchanged one look, and the room shifted from a sanctuary into a staging ground. They reached the shack as the sun dipped behind the horizon. The door hung off one hinge, revealing the occupant slumped in a wooden chair. His skin was the color of wet ash, translucent and thin. A jagged stone sat pressed against his chest, pulsing with a sick, rhythmic light. Serafina did not hesitate. She dropped to the floor, marking a chalk circle around the man, her movements precise and fast. Vesper gripped the man's shoulders to keep him steady as the first syllable left Serafina's lips. The air inside the shack grew heavy, vibrating with a sharp, dissonant hum. The shard rattled against the man's chest, sparking with dark energy. Serafina raised her voice, the chant cutting through the room like a blade. The circle flared white, blinding, and intense. The shard shrieked, a sound of tearing metal, before it shattered into fine black dust. The man slumped forward, gasping as blood rushed back into his pale cheeks. He breathed in deep, ragged lungfuls of air. Noctis leaned in close, his eyes hard. "Where did you get it?" he demanded. The man pointed a trembling hand toward the central market, whispering of a merchant in a hooded cloak. They moved through the market district with practiced silence. The hooded figure kept to the deepest shadows, weaving through the labyrinth of back alleys. Every time the team drew close, the merchant accelerated, rounding corners with unnatural fluidity. Finally, the figure ducked into a massive, windowless warehouse, and the heavy iron door groaned shut. They waited in the damp darkness of the alley until the last worker departed, leaving the building silent. Serafina moved to the side entrance, her tools clicking against the lock. A sharp metallic snap echoed in the quiet air, and the door gave way. They slipped inside, the air instantly thick with a strange, static charge. Rows of long tables stretched into the gloom, covered in hundreds of unstable, glowing crystals. The light pulsed in a sickly, synchronized rhythm that made the floor feel unstable beneath their boots. It was not just a storehouse, it was a powder keg. The sheer volume of the jagged stones hummed with a low, bone-deep vibration. They stood frozen at the threshold, the weight of the potential explosion pressing against their lungs. This was no simple trade. It was a stockpile built for catastrophe. Vespa moved to the back office, his hands steady as he cleared the shelves of blueprints and supply logs. Across the warehouse floor, Luna worked with rhythmic precision, securing the final C4 charges to the primary steel support beams. Serafina walked to the center of the room, standing amidst the humming rows of unstable crystals. She raised both hands, her fingers tensed. The air turned heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and static. Blue electricity arced from her palms, snapping toward the nearest tables. Every crystal in the room began to vibrate, a high-pitched whine that escalated into a scream. The crystals cracked, their glow turning from soft pulses to blinding, jagged flashes. Serafina slammed her hands downward, channeling the force into the foundation. She shouted for the exit, and they sprinted toward the side door, boots pounding against the concrete. They threw themselves into the night air just as the building groaned and buckled. Serafina hit the detonator. A roar tore through the darkness, brighter than the moon. The warehouse disintegrated in a single, earth-shaking blast, spraying debris into the sky. A wave of heat rolled over them, and the ground finally went still. They stumbled through the front door, the heavy oak frame closing with a final, solid thud that sealed out the night. The living room was exactly as they had left it, but the air felt different now, stripped of the previous urgency. Serafina moved to the small kitchen area, her movements slow and deliberate. The sound of water hitting the kettle was sharp and clear in the quiet house. She poured the steaming tea into the waiting cups, the liquid swirling with deep, amber light. Vesper stood by the table, methodically slicing a dense, dark chocolate cake into thick wedges. No one spoke. The adrenaline that had driven them for hours was fading, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. They sank onto the sofa, the cushions yielding under their weight. Luna took a cup, holding it with both hands to catch the heat. Noctis stared into the fireplace, watching the remnants of the fire flicker against the logs. The steam from the tea rose in thin, lazy ribbons toward the ceiling, twisting into the still air. Outside, the world was silent, the danger neutralized, and the mission finally dissolved into the simple, steady rhythm of breathing. They sat together, anchored by the quiet, waiting for the night to pass.